The night was cold, and Kim was bundling up in her jacket to keep warm. She shivered to herself and hurried to the agreed meeting point, 1941 Kirk Street. It was a rundown old shack of a building. There were borders on every few windows, and it looked particularly abandoned, maybe even condemned. But this was where Ricky said he would wait for her. She just hoped that he wasn't bullshitting her. She hadn't come unprepared, though. The chief's warning still played in her mind as she approached the building. She had her weapon hidden beneath her coat, ready in case anything funny happened. And she also wasn't alone. Walking beside her, yawning tiredly, was Officer Grayson. He was a mousy-haired fellow in his mid-40s, lazy and a bit of a doofus to a few in the precinct, but he did like Kim. He was always sneaking peeks at her when she walked by, and anyone with eyes could see that he fancied her. Too bad for him, she thought, that he wasn't her type. And he knew it, too, but that didn't stop him from trying. Good thing, too. She wanted some backup tonight. There was no telling how Ricky and his boys would act, and having 2 armed cops was better than 1. Kirk was wearing civilian clothes with his shield under his jacket and a gun on his side, too, but he looked far less aware than prepared than Kim would have liked. "Look alive, Grayson," Kim hissed. "This is the spot."
"But no one's here, Kim," Grayson shrugged. "This Ricky guy doesn't seem like an upstanding guy from what you told me."
Kim had been very careful about how much she told Ricky. She couldn't be sure if Grayson would rat her out to the chief about this little outing, and as far as Grayson knew, she was just getting intel from an informant, and she wanted someone to watch her back, and that was all he needed to know.
"He's not, but he's my informant," Kim replied, stopping outside the condemned structure.
Grayson looked around and shivered a bit, and after waiting a few moments, Grayson finally groaned.
"Look, Kim, if this is some offhand way of asking me out, we could have just gone for coffee or something," he teased. "This isn't a date."
"Not yet, it's not," Grayson snickered.
"Come on, let's forget this shack and go find a coffee shop nearby and we'll—"
The door to the shack opened, shutting Grayson up. Out from inside walked 5 men and 1 woman. The men were dressed in mostly denim and leather, with chains, studs, and no shortage of tattoos. 2 wore sunglasses, despite it being night out. 1 was black with a bald head, and 1 had a long scar running down his face to his chin, as if someone had taken a machete to it. The girl had short-cut hair on one side of her head and shaved on the other. She had thick black lipstick and eyeliner giving off a goth look, and she had on fishnet stockings, thigh-high boots, and piercing gray eyes as she smiled. She was leaning against the black man who had his arms crossed. Grayson looked over all of them and took a step back, shocked by the arrival of this little gang. Then, walking out from amongst them, the 7th member, and the one that Kim was waiting for, Ricky. He was smiling with a look that was anything but warm.
"Detective," he laughed, "and here I was wondering if you were going to show."
"You told me you had information on Dracula," Kim snapped. Grayson suddenly stared back at Kim in surprise.
"What, Dracula? You're on the Dracula killer case?"
"Yes, now be quiet," Kim hissed.
"Aw, straight to business already?" Ricky laughed. "I ain't even introduced you to the guys yet."
The goth girl coughed.
"Oops, and lady," he nodded. "Want to come inside and have a drink? Promise we don't bite."
The crew laughed at this, and Kim could feel all 7 of their eyes staring down at her hungrily, the way an animal stares at meat. 1 step in that shack, and she knew she'd never walk out again. "Sorry, I'm with company," she said, indicating Grayson.
"Well, he can come too," the girl teased, "though I might bite him if he's into that kind of thing."
"Don't tease, Vix," the black man laughed. "Kid don't look like you could handle your kind of fun." Grayson bristled a little at the insult, but before he could say anything, Kim stepped forward between them.
"We're both with the NYPD, she snapped, showing her badge and gun. "Detective Kim Menseong and Officer Kurt Grayson. I came here because you told me you'd help me catch the Dracula killer, and you'd better hold up your end of the bargain, or I'll have to start digging into all your little secrets."
The 7 reprobates didn't look fazed by that. One of the tattoo men just sneered.
"Man, she's bossy," he hissed. "You sure like 'em bitchy, Rick." "But you should have seen the way she walked up to me in the cafe," Rick laughed, swinging his hips in a mocking fashion. "She was begging me for it."
The group howled with laughter, and Kim finally had enough.
"Fine, we're leaving, and I'll be back to rip your home apart," Kim snapped.
"This ain't our home, detective," Ricky explained. Kim paused, and sensing a slight urgency in Ricky's voice.
"And we were just playing around a little. Don't take it so personally, huh, babe? I tell you what, you want to catch that bloodsucker? I'll show you what to do. A promise is a promise."
Kim looked back at him and the crew, and they were all grinning.
"Fine. Start talking."
"Kim, I got a bad feeling," Grayson whispered, but Kim ignored him.
"Our little family we have ways of finding people."
catching them, Ricky explained. So if you join us, we can find anyone you like. Mike Barnes, Dracula, whoever you want.
I thought you said you knew where Mike Barnes was, Kim challenged.
Well, not yet. But we can find him, Ricky explained. We're really good at finding people.
Kim, we should go now, Grayson hissed.
Look, Ricky hissed, stepping in with a bit more hostility. The fact is that you want Dracula, and Dracula hits high rollers and scumbags up top. That means you need to find Mike Barnes. We find Mike Barnes for you, and you use that to find Dracula.
And what do I have to do? Kim asked.
You join up, Ricky laughed. You're a pretty good looker, and we ain't had no one from the Far East put on the colors before.
Come on, Ricky, she's not nearly as good as me, Vix called.
Ricky smiled back at her jokingly and then looked back at Kim. So, what do you say? Want to join us? You can still be a cop on the side if you want, if you like that kind of thing, but I can promise we're way more fun.
Kim glared down at Ricky with a cold snarl and turned on her heels. The chief was right. Coming to you was a mistake. I'm leaving. I'll find out about Mike Barnes on my own. Just stay out of my way.
As she turned, suddenly Ricky growled and grabbed her arm. You know, I was being nice, detective, he snapped.
Let go of me!
Kim swung around and struck Ricky across the mouth, who yelped and let her go, stumbling back. A low growl came from Ricky, and the rest of the crew were smirking in anticipation. Oh, she shouldn't have done that, one of the guys laughed. Kim backed up, and to Grayson's credit, he pulled his gun, aiming it at Ricky. You're under arrest for assaulting a police officer, he shouted. Kim suddenly saw a dangerous look in Ricky's eye, and a sense of foreboding began to overtake her.
Grayson, put it down. We should walk away.
No way! He can't get away with grabbing you like that, Grayson snapped. Put your hands where I can see him.
Rick's eyes fell on Grayson, and the bravado in the officer's voice suddenly faded. A soft glow began to fill the night as the moon came out from behind the clouds, and Ricky was snarling angrily.
You filthy bitch, Ricky snapped. I offer you the chance of a lifetime and you slap me in the face. Fine. Don't join the pack. Just means you're prey. Suddenly, Ricky underwent a horrifying transformation. His body began to grow and face were altered, growing a muzzle, long, sharp ears growing from his head. His feet became paws ripping through his boots, and his hands became like large claws. Fur covered his body. His eyes became a piercing yellow. Grayson let out a yelp as the monstrous figure that was Ricky let out a loud and furious howl. Standing before them was a wolf, standing on two legs and with fangs filling its mouth. A werewolf.
Grayson, run!
Kim screamed. Grayson fired off 2 shots at the giant wolf man, only for him to be knocked to the ground by a furious claw. He hit the ground hard, his gun sliding away. Kim made a move towards him, but Grayson waved his hand. Run! He screamed. No sooner had the cry escaped his mouth than she saw the other 6 members of the packs, all now wolf beasts like Ricky, descend on Grayson, jumping at him with the frenzy of a wolf pack. Grayson's screams were horrible, and Kim sprinted towards her car as fast as she could, struggling to get the howls of pain and fear out of his ears. She grabbed for the door, only for Wolf Ricky to leap on top of the car, snarling. Going somewhere, babe, he growled. Kim screamed and pulled her gun, firing once at Ricky. The bullet went into his chest, and he laughed at it. Keep trying. Might work eventually. The other werewolves, who had finished ravaging poor Grayson, were now growling and snapping their jaws as they approached her. Kim spun and ran as fast as she could for the alley. The wolves laughed, giving chase. Grabbing a garbage tin, she hurled it behind her, and to her brief satisfaction, she heard a yelp as one of the wolves collided with it. She ducked under plywood and hopped puddles and garbage. The sound of howls and barks behind her revealed they weren't being slowed. She could practically feel their jaws opening, ready to snap down on her. She willed herself to go faster, her legs and lungs screaming in agony. She didn't even know where she was running. She just had to keep going, get away from these monsters. No, she cried as she nearly crashed into a brick wall. A dead end, the edge of the alley. Her collision stirred a few bats that were hanging on the landing above her, and they flew away with shrieks. She turned fast to see 4 of the 7 wolves now blocking her exit. There was a bunch of bricks as 2 more jumped over her, standing on top of the brick wall she was pressed up against. Nowhere to go now, one hissed. Out of the pack, Ricky walked over. Even as a wolf, his cocky demeanor still gave him away. He was grinning, and Kim was breathing heavily, backing up, flattened against the wall behind her.
Werewolves? You're werewolves!
Careful, she's learning, another wolf laughed, sending howls of laughter through the pack. Ricky smirked and took another step forward. Kim desperately raised her pistol again. Ricky stopped, and the howls of laughter resumed. Ricky was doubling over with barking cackles.
Oh, I gotta give it to you, doll. You really are funny, he mocked. Come on, don't be an idiot. You know that toy won't hurt me. You tried it already.
It was true. The bullets didn't bother him, and yet she couldn't put it down. It was all she had, her only defense. To drop it was to surrender, and she had to fight, had to stand up. Grayson had...
You killed him? Get over it.
Vix, the wolf behind Ricky, snapped.
We kill all the time, just like you pigs kill. The difference is we don't got a badge to get away with it.
Chill out, Vix, Ricky growled, making her back turn. It was clear Ricky was the leader here.
The badge doesn't matter if she runs with the pack.
Ricky took another step forward, his brown fur glowing under the full moon.
And you will join us, won't you?
What?
One bite, Ricky explained. All it takes is one. I promise it won't hurt for long. Then on the next full moon, you'll change for the first time. You'll run with us, hunt with us, fight with us, and this serial killer you're after, this Dracula, whoever, well, he can't hide from our sense of smell. We'll hunt him down and help you rip him apart if you like. But first, you gotta be my girl.
You're such a dog, Rick, one of the wolves laughed, sending up more laughter.
Come on, say you'll be one of us. Join our little family, Rick sneered.
Kim's hands were shaking. Her fingers trembled, and she looked helplessly from Ricky to the moon. She didn't want to be a monster like them. They'd killed Grayson, and he probably wasn't the only one they've murdered. And they'd kill her if she refused. She didn't want to die. She wanted to be a good cop. She wanted to live. But would that be her only way out?
Choose.
A voice seemed to whisper in her ear. She yelped and her eyes widened from the strange voice. She couldn't see anyone, but the voice was certainly not Ricky's. You're scared. You're alone. You're trapped between death and damnation. Your comrade is slain and the beast craves your flesh. You have two choices before you. Will you embrace the damnation in front of you and offer yourself to the beast? Or will you fight it?
If I fight, I'll...
Choose! Ricky was now only inches away from her.
So, what's it gonna be? He asked.
Kim's eyes looked up at Ricky. She raised her pistol and fired once into his neck. Ricky jolted back from the impact, but then sighed with disdain. As she'd feared, it done nothing to him. But she'd made her choice. She wouldn't be like them. She'd die a good cop. She closed her eyes and waited for the attack.
Ah, what a shame. Yes, you... What the fuck?
Kim's eyes jolted open as the sound of hundreds of screaming, screeching bats filled her ears. A twister of mad and flapping vermin swirled around her. She had to back away further to escape the hordes of flying creatures. Even the werewolves looked unnerved. When the bats stopped their flying and dissipated, standing where they once had been was a man. He had a long leather jacket and a hood over his head. His jeans were worn and faded, his hands tucked into their pockets. His back was to Kim, so she couldn't see his face, but she didn't want to. She felt something horrifying about him, a strange stench of death and blood.
Who the fuck is this? Like I'm supposed to know? Shut up, Ricky snarled. Who are you?
The figure didn't answer at first. He simply glared at them all, through eyes that seemed to glow with a crimson-red aura. Ricky let out a roar and charged him. Get out of my way! Ricky was stopped in his tracks as the man had apparently thrust his arm forward and impaled Ricky through the chest with his bare hand. Ricky stood in stunned horror as he looked down at the man, who had literally shoved his hand through his body. Kim let out a scream of terror, and the wolves all roared in horror. The man yanked back his hand and stepped aside as Ricky fell to the ground, bleeding profusely from his now open chest. Clutched in the man's hand was a still beating, wretched red heart. The red eyes of the man met the pack. Behind sneering lips he spat. Nothing but filthy dogs, yapping mongrels that yap at the heels of their betters, begging for scraps. You flaunt your forms as if they were medals of honor, and you slay innocents who have done you no injury. Scum like you are parading as creatures of the night. Don't make me laugh. He then crushed the heart in his bare hand, and his blood sprayed in all directions. The wolf that was Ricky howled in agony and finally ceased breathing, his form reverting back to a human one. He lay there, eyes open wide in terror. The man dropped the remains of the heart and then stepped towards Kim, who was now on the verge of having a full panic attack. Urine trickled from between her legs as the frightening red-eyed man grabbed her arm. His touch was firm and enough to make her faint. Her eyelids grew heavy, and the darkness closed in on her as the roars and bellows of angry wolves announced an all-out attack.